Good evening and welcome to Stories from the Shed, Danny the Champion of the World, Chapter 8. We're on a slightly different location today. We've got Pesco outside, and if you remember from the end of Chapter 7, Danny was on his way to Hazelwood. He had to avoid a police car and he was just very, very near Hazelwood on what looked like a dirt track. The police car has just passed him once and he's waiting to see if he'll come back again. I sat as quiet as a mouse and waited. I waited for a long time. Then I heard the sound of a motor coming back again in my direction. He was making a terrific noise. He was going flat out. He whizzed past me like a rocket. The way he was gunning the motor told me he was a very angry man. He must have been a very puzzled man, too, because he was thinking he'd seen a ghost boy driving a ghost car. I waited to see if he would come back again. He didn't come. I switched on my lights. I pressed the starter. She started at once. But what about the wheels and the chassis? I felt sure something must have got broken. When she jumped off the road onto the cart track, I put her into gear and very gently began to ease her forward. I listened carefully for horrid noises. There were none. I managed to get her off the grass and back onto the track. I drove very slowly now. The track was extremely rough and rutted, and the slope was pretty steep. The little car bounced and bumped all over the place. But she kept going. Then at last, ahead of me and over to the right, looking like some gigantic black creature crouching on the crest of the hill, I saw Hazelwood. Soon I was there. Immense trees rose up towards the sky all along the right-hand side of the track. I stopped the car. I switched off the motor and the lights. I got out, taking the torch with me. There was the usual hedge dividing the wood from the track. I squeezed my way through it and suddenly I was right inside the wood. So here we are. Danny's now inside the wood. When I looked up into the trees had closed in above my head like a prison roof, and I couldn't see the smallest patch of sky or a single star. I couldn't see anything at all. The darkness was so solid around me I could almost touch it. "Dad," I called out. "Dad, are you there?" My small high voice echoed through the forest and faded away. I listened for an answer, but none came. And there's Danny. There's a picture of Danny in the woods, calling out for his dad. Let's move on to Chapter 8, The Pit. I cannot possibly describe to you what it felt like to be standing alone in the pitchy blackness of that silent wood in the small hours of the night. The sense of loneliness was overwhelming. The silence was as deep as death. And the only sounds were the ones I made myself. I tried to keep absolutely still for as long as possible to see if I could hear anything at all. I listened and listened. I held my breath and listened again. I had a queer feeling that the whole wood was listening with me. The trees and the bushes, the little animals hiding in the undergrowth, and the birds roosting in the branches. All were listening. Even the silence was listening. Silence was listening to silence. I switched on the torch. A brilliant beam of light reached out ahead of me like a long white arm. That was better. Now at any rate I could see where I was going. The keepers would also see, but I didn't care about the keepers anymore. The only person I cared about was my father. I wanted him back. I kept the torch on and went deeper into the wood. "Dad!" I shouted. "Dad, it's Danny! Are you there?" I didn't know which direction I was going. I just went on walking and calling out, walking and calling. And there's Danny in the wood, if you can see that there, with his torch going through the wood. And each time I called, I would stop and listen, but no answer came. After a little while, my voice began to go all trembly. I started to say silly things like, "Dad, please tell me where you are. Please answer me, please." And I knew that if I wasn't careful, the sheer hopelessness of it all would get the better of me, and I would simply give up and lie down under the trees. "Are you there, Dad? Are you there?" I shouted. "It's Danny." I stood still, listening, listening, listening. and in the silence that followed, I thought I heard the faint but oh so faint sound of a human voice. I froze and kept listening. Yet there it was again. I ran towards the sound. "Dad!" I shouted. "It's Danny! Where are you?" I stopped and listened again. This time the answer came just loud enough for me to hear the words. "I'm here," the voice called out. "Over here." It was him. I was so excited my legs began to get all shaky. "Where are you, Danny?" my father called out. "I'm here, Dad. I'm coming." With the beam of the torch shining ahead of me, I ran towards the voice. The trees were bigger here and spaced farther apart. The ground was a carpet of brown leaves from last year, and it was good to run on. I didn't call out any more after that. I simply dashed ahead. All at once, his voice was right in front of me. "Stop! Danny! 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 Stop!" he said. "Where are you, Dad?" I couldn't see him. I stopped dead. I shone the torch over the ground. "I'm down here. Come forward slowly, but be careful. Don't fall in." I crept forward. Then I saw the pit. I went to the edge of it and shone the light downward, and there was my father. He was sitting on the floor of the pit, and he looked up into the light and said, "Hello, my marvellous boy. Thank you for coming." "Are you all right, Dad?" "My ankle seems to be broken," he said. "It happened when I fell in." The pit had been dug into the shape of a square, with each side about 6 foot long, but it was the depth of it that was so awful. It was at least 12 feet deep. Goodness me, that's over the height of 2 Mr. Spencers, something like that. The sides had been cut straight down into the earth, presumably with a mechanical digger, and no man could have climbed out of it without help. "Does it hurt, Dad?" I asked. "Yes," he said, "it hurts a lot. But don't worry about that. The point is, Danny, I've got to get out of here before morning. The keepers know I'm here, and they're coming back for me as soon as it gets light." "Did they dig this hole to catch people?" I asked. "Oh, yes," he said. "And we'll find out tomorrow if Danny can find a way to get his father out of the pit."